Atlanta, a May night. The clinking of champagne glasses in the Buckhead restaurant suddenly froze. The glittering lights, the lively chatter of my daughter Sarah's college graduation party abruptly became a distorted symphony in my ears. David, my husband of nearly 3 decades, stood there, champagne glass still raised, but the words he uttered were not a celebratory toast, but a sharp knife. "I've decided to start a new life without you." It was a brilliant May evening, the day Sarah, our only daughter, had just received her honors degree from prestigious Emory University. This was the moment I had dreamed of, nurtured with my youth and countless silent sacrifices. I, Mia Harrison, 54 years old, had spent nearly 30 years building this life, brick by brick, moment by moment of fabricated happiness. All around us, 50 pairs of eyes darted, from close friends to business partners, all stunned. The clinking of silverware ceased. Conversations halted mid-sentence. I looked at David, the man who had shared my bed and every secret with me for nearly 3 decades. His face, already flushed with alcohol and self-satisfaction, now hardened as his eyes waited for my reaction. I also caught a glimpse of Cassandra Wells, David's much younger mistress, shifting uncomfortably at a back table. She, who had attended our Christmas parties, who had once called me for career advice. Along with her were people I had considered friends for decades, people who clearly knew about the affair but never once thought to tell me. David had chosen a public, cruel way to humiliate me, right in front of everyone we knew, on our daughter's big day. He wanted me to collapse, to cry, to scream, to create a shameful scene. He wanted me to expose my weakness so he could leave without a guilty conscience, so he could be the victor in this play. A sharp pang shot down my spine, but I had rehearsed for this moment. David was mistaken. I wouldn't follow his script. Instead of tears, instead of the outburst everyone expected, I simply smiled, a faint, chillingly calm smile. It wasn't a smile of resignation, but of liberation, of a plan meticulously conceived long ago. "Congratulations on your honesty," I replied, my voice steady. My composure made the atmosphere even more tense, like a string pulled taut to its breaking point. I felt David's gaze falter, the self-satisfaction on his face beginning to crumble. With astonishing composure, I reached into my handbag and slowly pulled out a sealed, cream-colored envelope. I gently, deliberately placed it down right next to David's plate. "What's this?" he asked, his triumphant expression now laced with surprise and a hint of anxiety. "Something for you to read later," I replied, my eyes never leaving his, a mysterious smile still playing on my lips. Then I turned to Sarah, my daughter, whose face had gone pale with shock. I kissed her cheek, whispering, "I'm so proud of you, sweetheart. This day is still about your accomplishment." I wanted her to know that no matter what happened, this day was hers, not her father's. With a decisive gesture, I stood, smoothed my dress. I looked around, my eyes sweeping over every stunned face. "Please, enjoy your meal, everyone. I wish you all a lovely afternoon." With that, I walked out of the restaurant, head held high, each step steady, feeling 50 pairs of eyes following me. The heavy restaurant door swung shut behind me, cutting off the anxious murmurs that had begun to rise in the room. Outside, the humid Atlanta summer heat hit me like a wall, but I welcomed it. For the first time in years, I could breathe freely. Behind me, I heard the restaurant door open and slam shut, followed by David's voice, no longer confident but high-pitched and frantic. "Mia, what the hell is this? What have you done?" I kept walking, allowing myself a small smile. The envelope I'd handed him contained the beginning of my revenge, one I'd been meticulously planning for months. David's frantic shout echoed through the closed restaurant door, no longer carrying the self-satisfaction of a victor, but the sound of a cornered animal. I kept walking, allowing myself a small smile. The envelope I'd handed him contained the beginning of my revenge, one I'd been meticulously planning for months. I had always been the practical one in our marriage, while David dreamed big and took risks. I was the one who maintained the stability our family needed. I was the one who saved every penny for Sarah's education, even when David recklessly invested in his friend's haunted restaurant venture, an eatery that collapsed after just a few months of operation. I was the one who worked extra hours as a financial manager at Truvanta Corp. when his midlife crisis led him to quit his stable position to follow his passion selling handcrafted furniture, a passion that lasted approximately 6 months before my own dream of opening a financial consultancy for women was perpetually on hold. After Sarah graduates, I told myself, after David finds stability. But I wasn't just a devoted wife and mother. I was Mia Harrison, a financial professional for 30 years. I understood money trails, I knew how to trace assets, and I had put all that experience into my life. 3 months ago, I began to notice discrepancies in our joint accounts, small transfers to an account I didn't recognize. Having spent 20 years managing our family finances, these irregularities stood out like red flags. I could have confronted David immediately, but something held me back. Perhaps it was intuition, or perhaps it was the growing distance between us over the past year. Instead, I began quietly investigating. What I discovered was worse than I imagined. David had been systematically moving funds to a separate account for over a year. He had also been taking Cassandra to expensive restaurants, purchasing jewelry, and looking at beachfront property, all while telling me we needed to tighten our belts for retirement. Then came the text messages I discovered when David left his phone unlocked. Messages about their new life together. Messages about how he was finally breaking free from me. Messages about their plans for the day after Sarah's graduation. The day he had chosen to make his grand exit from our marriage. What David had forgotten, or perhaps never fully grasped, was that I was a financial professional for 30 years. I understood money trails. I knew how to trace assets. And most importantly, I remembered the prenuptial agreement we had signed 28 years ago when I had more family money than he did. He had insisted upon it, ironically to protect his future earnings. But it contained a fidelity clause, a clause that would prove to be his undoing. That fidelity clause, which David himself had stubbornly pushed for to protect himself when we married, an act he considered shrewd, was now the very blade cutting him down. While David plotted his escape with Cassandra, I was building my case. Day by day, I transformed pain into precision. I consulted with the best family law attorney in Atlanta. I documented every hidden transfer, backed up every email and text message. I gathered every smallest piece of evidence of their affair, from restaurant receipts to candid photos taken at parties I didn't even attend. I prepared the divorce papers, every word sharp, legally watertight. I timed everything perfectly, knowing David would want to wait until after Sarah's graduation to avoid ruining her big day. He wanted a public exit to humiliate me. I would give him an even grander performance, but on my terms. What he didn't expect was that I would file for divorce the morning of the graduation, before his planned announcement. With those papers still safely hidden in court records, inaccessible to him, David had no idea I was always 3 steps ahead. I didn't return to the restaurant. Instead, I drove straight to our home, a spacious colonial in Augusta's historic district that we had purchased 15 years ago. That house, where I had raised my daughter, where I had cherished so many dreams of a complete family. The house David had brazenly promised to Cassandra, according to text messages he hadn't realized I had seen. I parked in the driveway and calmly entered what had been our shared space for over a decade. Everything seemed the same, but everything had changed. I parked in the driveway and calmly entered the spacious colonial home in Augusta's historic district, the house David had brazenly promised to Cassandra, according to text messages he hadn't realized I had seen. Everything seemed the same. The family photos on the walls, my father's antique grandfather clock, the worn leather couch where David and I had once dreamed of our future together. Yet, Everything had changed. Heavy silence settled, but within me a strange sense of calm grew. For over a decade this had been our shared space, where I had dedicated my youth and love. Every corner of the house held memories, from Sarah's laughter echoing through the halls to nights David and I sat together on the old sofa, envisioning a bright future. Now it all felt like a play, a perfect performance in which I had been the lead character, yet utterly unaware of the true script. That deception now was no longer a pinprick, but a massive iceberg melting, exposing everything. I went straight upstairs to the master bedroom. I opened David's closet, and sure enough, his clothes were neatly packed in suitcases, hidden in the back, ready for his planned departure tomorrow. I smiled at his predictability. David was always meticulous about the smallest details of his clothing, from choosing a tie to folding a shirt. But for the things that truly mattered, honesty, trust, and our family's future, he was shockingly careless. My phone buzzed incessantly with messages from friends at the restaurant, from Sarah, even from Diana, David's sister, who had flown in for the graduation. I responded only to my daughter. "I'm okay. This isn't your burden to carry. Enjoy your graduation day. We'll talk tonight. I love you." 3 hours later, I heard David's car in the driveway. The front door slammed open. "Mia!" he shouted, his voice echoing through the house, no longer frantic from the restaurant, but now laced with pure fury. "Where are you?" I calmly sat in the living room, laptop on the table, reviewing important documents. I closed it as he stormed in, his face flushed with anger, the divorce papers clutched in his hand. "What is the meaning of this?" he demanded, waving the papers. "You served me with divorce papers today of all days?" "I thought it aligned nicely with your plans," I replied calmly, my voice steady, not a tremor. "You wanted to start your new life. I'm simply helping facilitate the transition." David stared at me, his eyes wide with disbelief. "You had no right to—" he shouted. "I had every right," I interrupted, my voice firm and resolute. "Just as you had every right to choose Cassandra. We all make choices, David." He stepped back, a flicker of surprise crossing his face at my resolve. David tried to regain his composure, his voice suddenly smug. "The prenup expired years ago. Any lawyer will tell you that." I allowed myself a small smile, one he had never seen before. "Actually, it didn't," I softly replied, looking straight into his eyes. "Section 12 specifically states that the fidelity clause remains in effect for the duration of the marriage." "Your lawyer should have explained that to you." "Oh wait, you didn't consult one, did you?" The color drained from David's face as the reality sank in, more devastating than any accusation. The very prenuptial agreement he had insisted upon to protect his potential wealth was now the instrument crushing him. David's self-satisfaction completely collapsed. He slumped onto the couch, his face ashen. That agreement would cost him everything: the house, the Savannah vacation property, and most of our retirement accounts. His grand gesture at the restaurant had just become the most expensive announcement of his life. "You can't do this to me," he whispered, his voice filled with despair. "We built this life together." "And you chose to end it," I replied, "though not in the way you planned." David's phone buzzed persistently in his pocket. He glanced at it, then ignored it. Cassandra calling, no doubt, wondering where he was and why their carefully orchestrated plan hadn't unfolded. "You've always been calculating, Mia," he said, trying a different approach. "But this is cold. What about our history? 28 years together means nothing?" I looked at him, the man I had loved for nearly 3 decades. When had he changed? Or had he always been this person, and I had been too devoted to notice? "Our history meant everything to me," I answered truthfully. "That's why your betrayal hurt so deeply." His expression softened momentarily, his eyes showing a hint of feigned remorse, perhaps seeing an opening to turn the tide. "Then maybe we can fix this," he said, his voice trying to sound sincere. "I made a mistake. People make mistakes. But I had seen too many of David's acts before, For over a year I had lived in the shadow of the lies he had spun. I had watched him systematically transfer our money, seen him scout expensive beachfront properties with Cassandra, while coming home and telling me we needed to tighten our belts. I had read his disgusting text messages, where he plotted a public breakup to humiliate me, believing I was too weak to fight back. Every detail was etched into my mind, not as a mistake, but as pieces of a cruel conspiracy. "This wasn't a mistake, David," I said, my voice as cold as ice. "This was a calculated plan spanning more than a year." David's face hardened, the remorse vanishing, replaced by his ingrained anger. "You're exaggerating," he snarled. "Am I?" I asked, a slight smirk playing on my lips. I slowly raised my phone, opening the recording app. The living room fell into a tense silence as I pressed play. David's voice echoed, smug and scheming. "After the graduation, I'll tell her it's over. A public setting is better. She won't make a scene in front of everyone." Then Cassandra's voice reverberating through the phone's speaker. "And she has no idea about the money." Finally, David's voice again, cold and contemptuous. "None. Mia trusts me completely. That's her weakness." The blood drained from David's face. He stumbled back, hitting the table, his eyes wide with horror. "You recorded our conversations? That's illegal," his voice stuttered, filled with panic. "Not in Georgia when one party consents," I replied, my voice chillingly calm. "And not when it's in your own home." I looked straight into his eyes, each word like a slow knife twisting into his self-assurance. "I didn't record your private moments with Cassandra. I'm not cruel, just the conversations about your plans to defraud me." David stood abruptly, bewildered and panicked. "I need to make some calls," he stammered, his face ashen. "Of course," I said, my tone cool. "Your attorney might be a good start." I looked at David, who was trying to regain his composure, then softly added, "I'll be staying at Diana's tonight." At the mention of his sister's name, David froze. "Diana's?" he sputtered, as if he couldn't believe his ears. I nodded, a knowing smile playing on my lips. "Yes. She's quite upset with you, actually." David's eyes widened. "She was the one who first spotted you and Cassandra together last Christmas. She didn't tell me immediately. She confronted you first. You promised her it was nothing, that you would end it. When she realized you hadn't, she came to me." This was another crushing blow David hadn't anticipated. Deanna and I had always been close, but he never imagined his own sister would choose my side, that she would be the one to expose more of his lies. "Everyone's betraying me," David muttered, his voice sinking into despair. "Ironic, isn't it?" I replied without a trace of pity. I picked up my purse and the small overnight bag I had packed earlier. "You have until tomorrow evening to remove your things from the house. After that, the locks will be changed." I walked towards the door, feeling a sense of relief wash over me. I had held back for too long, endured too much. Now everything was slowly falling into place. David stood there watching me, his face filled with despair and confusion. He had never imagined his play would have an ending like this. As I headed toward the door, feeling I could finally breathe a sigh of relief, David called after me, his voice desperate and deceitful. "What about Sarah? Have you thought about how this affects her?" Our daughter's name, uttered from his lips, was like a final shield, a desperate attempt to appeal to any remaining emotion in me. The anger which I had suppressed for months finally broke through my calm facade. "Don't you dare use our daughter as a shield, David," I retorted, my voice no longer calm but tinged with clear indignation. "You certainly weren't thinking about her when you were planning your new beachfront life with Cassandra." His hypocrisy was sickening. He was ready to shatter our family on her big day, but now he put on the face of a concerned father. Just then, his phone buzzed persistently in his pocket. He glanced at it, then let out a groan of frustration. "Cassandra is at the apartment already," he said, his voice heavy. "She's moved her things in." A slight smirk appeared on my lips, signaling another blow was coming. The apartment you put in both your names? I asked, my tone laced with knowing. The lease you signed last month? David nodded, looking confused, not understanding how I knew such details. His eyes darted at me suspiciously, as if I were a mysterious phantom that had appeared out of nowhere. You might want to check with the leasing office, I said, each word like a slow knife slicing into his self-satisfaction. I looked straight into his eyes, my face devoid of emotion. That application was flagged for credit issues and never completed. David stood frozen, his mouth agape. The agent called our home phone to verify information, I continued, a triumphant smile blooming on my lips. I handled it myself. A click sounded in David's head as he realized the full truth. The intricate web he had painstakingly woven had been unraveled by me from within. I turned, walked out the door, leaving David to face the first of many consequences. His perfectly planned new life was unraveling faster than he could process. A sense of triumph flooded me, a sweet satisfaction I had craved for so long. I drove to Diana's house, David's sister, who had chosen my side. She lived in a charming bungalow across town, near the university where she taught. When I arrived, she greeted me with a fierce hug. "I just heard from Sarah," she said, pulling me inside. "Are you okay?" "I'm better than I expected," I admitted, following Diana to the kitchen where a bottle of wine was already open. She poured 2 glasses, and we sat down at the kitchen table. Diana was an independent, strong woman, a literature professor who cherished freedom and deep conversations. I had always admired her, and now her presence was a great comfort. I had suppressed so much for so long, and being with someone I trusted completely, without judgment, was truly a blessing. "I never thought David would make such a spectacle," Diana said, her voice filled with disbelief. "At the restaurant, in front of everyone? He's lost his mind." "He meant to humiliate me," I explained, accepting the glass of wine. "A public rejection, so I couldn't fight back without looking hysterical." Diana's face darkened. My brother always did have a flair for drama, but this is beyond anything I expected from him. Diana's anger for her brother was even stronger than I had imagined, and it made me feel understood. In the middle of our conversation, my phone buzzed. It was Sarah. I took a deep breath before answering. "Mom," her voice strained. "I'm coming over to Aunt Diana's." "Honey, you don't have to," I tried to reassure her. "I'm already on my way," she interrupted. "Dad is telling everyone you've lost your mind, that you've been planning this for months. He's saying horrible things." David was always good at rewriting narratives to cast himself as the victim. "Let him talk," I told Sarah. "The truth will become clear soon enough." I hung up, my heart filled with love and protection for my daughter. I had protected Sarah from the truth for months, not wanting to overshadow her final semester with family drama. She might be angry that I hadn't told her, but I knew she would understand eventually. Sarah had inherited my practicality along with her father's charisma, a powerful combination that had helped her graduate with honors. About 20 minutes later, Sarah arrived, still in her graduation dress, but with her makeup smudged from crying. She fell into my arms like she used to as a child after a nightmare. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked, her voice muffled against my shoulder. "I didn't want to ruin your final semester," I explained. "You worked so hard for this day." She pulled back, wiping her eyes. "Well, Dad took care of ruining it anyway." We moved to Diana's living room, where Sarah finally got the full story. How I had discovered the affair, the financial deceptions, and the plans David and Cassandra had made. The doorbell rang, interrupting our emotional conversation. Diana went to answer it, returning moments later with a troubled expression. "It's David," she said, her voice laced with discomfort, "and he's not alone." I steeled myself, tightening the silver bracelet on my wrist, a gift from Sarah, and preparing myself. Diana led David and Cassandra into the living room. Cassandra looked uncomfortable, shifting her weight from one foot to the other, her eyes darting around the room, avoiding my gaze. She was 37, Not exactly a trophy wife, but still 17 years my junior, with shoulder-length blonde hair and the kind of confidence that comes from never having faced real hardship. In contrast, David looked furious. His earlier desperation had hardened into a cold anger. He stared directly at me, his eyes blazing. For years, I had been the peacemaker, the one who smoothed over conflicts and kept everyone happy in the family. That role was exhausting, and I had finally decided to lay it down. Now I simply sat, watching his drama unfold. David, still wearing the tie I had chosen for him that morning, was a coiled mass of fury. Cassandra huddled behind him like a guilty shadow. Sarah, my daughter, who had just found some peace in my arms, now stood up, placing herself slightly in front of me. "Mia, you need to stop this insanity," David demanded, his voice laced with false authority. "Unfreeze the accounts. We can discuss this like reasonable adults." He intended to use his patriarchal tone to overpower me, as he usually did. But this time, Sarah was quicker than I. "Maybe you should have tried being reasonable before announcing to everyone that you were leaving, Mom." David's eyes widened as if just noticing Sarah's presence. "Sarah, this doesn't involve you." "Doesn't involve me?" Sarah echoed incredulously, her voice trembling with indignation. "You blew up our family on my graduation day, and it doesn't involve me?" Cassandra touched David's arm, whispering, "Greg, maybe we should go." He shook her off. "No, I'm not leaving until Mia agrees to be rational about this." Diana folded her arms, stepping closer. "My sister-in-law seems to be the only rational person in this scenario," she stated bluntly. "You're the one who created this mess, David." I remained seated looking straight at David, and once again I decided to take control of the conversation. "The accounts will remain frozen until the preliminary hearing," I said calmly. "That's in 3 days. The judge will determine appropriate asset division at that time." David sputtered. 3 days? What am I supposed to do for 3 days? "You have your personal account, don't you?" I reminded him. "The one you've been funneling money into for the past year. That should be sufficient." Cassandra's head whipped toward David. Her eyes were filled with suspicion. "You have a separate account with how much in it?" An interesting dynamic was emerging. Clearly, David hadn't been entirely forthcoming with Cassandra either. David ignored her question. "This is vindictive, Mia. This isn't like you." "Perhaps you never really knew me," I replied, "just as I apparently never really knew you." The suspicion in Cassandra's eyes was enough for me to know that David had built a financial sandcastle not just with me, but with her too. This confrontation was no longer just between me and David, but also the collapse within his illicit relationship. Sarah turned to Cassandra. Her voice, which had been trembling with anger, now carried a cold resolve. "Did you know he was going to announce it like that at my graduation celebration?" Cassandra had the decency to look ashamed. She bowed her head, avoiding Sarah's gaze. I thought he was going to talk to your mother privately." She looked at David, as if betrayed. The announcement today was unexpected. David glared at Cassandra, his eyes filled with reproach. Cracks were already forming in their united front. "I think you both should leave," Diana said firmly, stepping forward and placing a hand on Sarah's shoulder. "You've upset Sarah enough for one day." David turned to Sarah, his eyes pleading. "Sarah," he begged, "you understand that relationships change, don't you? Sometimes people grow apart." My daughter's face hardened in a way I had never seen before. "What I understand is that you're a coward," Sarah retorted, her voice echoing and full of power. "A coward who couldn't even give Mom the dignity of a private conversation." She took a deep breath, pain mingled with indignation in every word. "What I understand is that you were stealing from our family while I was working 2 jobs to help pay for my textbooks. Because you said money was tight." David paled. "That's not how it was. It's exactly how it was." Sarah cut him off. "Please leave, Dad. I can't look at you right now." The silence that followed was deafening, heavy and suffocating. Finally, David turned to go, Cassandra trailing behind him. At the door, he paused and looked back at me. "This isn't over, Mia. I'll fight you on this." I met his gaze steadily, my voice ringing with challenge and confidence. "You're welcome to try." After they left, Sarah collapsed next to me on the sofa, tears streaming down her face. "I've never talked to Dad like that," she whispered. I wrapped my arm around her shoulders. "Sometimes standing up for what's right is painful, my love." "To new beginnings," she said, raising her glass. Indeed, I thought. This ending was just the beginning of something new and powerful. The preliminary hearing took place in a small courtroom on a rainy Tuesday morning. The dim light of the gloomy day filtered through the window, casting weak beams onto the dark wooden floor, creating a heavy atmosphere. I arrived with my attorney, Philip, a calm man with sharp eyes and a confident demeanor. David was also there, looking visibly haggard, accompanied by a lawyer he had hastily retained, a young associate from a firm specializing in corporate law, not family matters. David's poor choice of legal representation was another consequence of his rushed planning and carelessness. In the days leading up to it, David had incessantly called and messaged, trying to negotiate, trying to talk reasonably, but I didn't respond. I knew that only justice could bring true peace. I had spent my life fulfilling roles, putting my own dreams aside to build a stable life for my family. Now it was time for me to claim what was rightfully mine, and more importantly, to prove that deception could not win. The judge was an older woman with sharp eyes and no patience for dramatics. She carefully reviewed our prenuptial agreement, every page faded by time. I felt David's gaze fixed on me, filled with animosity and helplessness. Beside me, Philip maintained a calm expression, only occasionally giving me a reassuring nod. "This document appears to be in order," the judge said, looking over her reading glasses at David's attorney. "Do you contest its validity?" David's young lawyer cleared his throat, looking uncomfortable. "Your Honor, we believe the agreement has expired due to the length of time that has passed." The judge raised an eyebrow, then read aloud from the document. Section 18 clearly states that the duration is for the term of the marriage plus any legal proceedings resulting from its dissolution. There is no expiration date indicated. David leaned forward to whisper urgently to his lawyer, who looked increasingly uncomfortable. "Furthermore," the judge continued, "the evidence of systematic fund transfers appears to violate the financial disclosure requirements in Section 23. She shuffled through the papers, then looked up, her gaze piercing David directly. "I am ruling to maintain the freeze on joint accounts pending full financial discovery. Mr. Harrison's personal account will remain accessible to him. The family home will remain in Mrs. Harrison's possession during proceedings as stipulated in the prenuptial agreement's infidelity clause." David's face flushed dark red and he muttered, "This is outrageous." The judge paid him no mind. She fixed him with a stern look. "Mr. Harrison, I suggest you review the agreement you signed more carefully. This court will reconvene in 30 days for the full hearing after discovery is complete." This wasn't just a legal ruling, it was a spiritual verdict, a public confirmation of David's failure. As we left the courtroom, David caught up to me in the hallway. "Mia, please. We need to talk about this reasonably. 28 years together has to count for something." I looked straight at him, my face expressionless. "It counted for everything," I replied. "Until you decided it didn't." I walked away, leaving him standing alone in the courthouse corridor, the weight of his choices finally beginning to sink in. In the days following the preliminary hearing, word of David's downfall spread quickly through our social circle. Friends called daily, some offering support, others seeking gossip. I maintained a dignified silence about the details, simply saying, "David and I are separating, these things happen." Meanwhile, David's carefully constructed facade, successful businessman, devoted family man, was crumbling beyond repair. The financial freeze meant he couldn't follow through on promises made to Cassandra. The beachfront property they had been planning to purchase fell through. The luxury car he had put a deposit on had to be cancelled. 2 weeks after the hearing, Diana called me, her voice tinged with amusement. "Have you heard the latest? Cassandra moved out already." Already? I wasn't entirely surprised, but the speed was impressive. Apparently, she'd discovered that David's business wasn't doing as well as he claimed. The substantial savings he talked about didn't exist. Cassandra told her friend Jennifer that she didn't sign up to date a man with financial problems. I couldn't help but laugh. He was always good at creating illusions. While David was drowning in his own mess, I was rebuilding my life. The financial security I had always maintained separate from our joint accounts gave me a freedom David hadn't anticipated. I rented a small office space downtown and began setting up the consultancy I had dreamed about for years. My first clients were 2 women going through divorces of their own. Word of mouth brought more. I specialized in helping women understand their finances during major life transitions, divorces, widowhood, career changes. The work was immediately fulfilling in a way my corporate job never had been. The final divorce hearing fell on what would have been our 29th anniversary, a fitting end to a chapter of my life that had lasted nearly 3 decades. David arrived looking haggard. I later learned that his business was struggling without my financial support and guidance. Cassandra was long gone, and most of our mutual friends had distanced themselves from him after learning the full story of his deception. The judge upheld the prenuptial agreement in its entirety. David left with his personal possessions, his struggling business, and the money in his private account, which after paying his attorney was barely enough to secure a small apartment. I retained our home, my retirement accounts, and 70% of our joint investments, exactly as the prenuptial agreement stipulated in cases of infidelity. The justice was poetic. The very document David had insisted upon to protect himself had become his downfall. As we left the courtroom, David approached me one last time. "I made a terrible mistake," he said quietly. "Is there any chance we could—" "No," I interrupted. Gentle but firm. "That door is closed." "I understand," he replied, and for once I believed he did. "I hope you find happiness, Mia. You deserve it." It was perhaps the first honest thing he had said to me in years. 6 months later, my consultancy, Caldwell Financial Transitions, was thriving. I had moved from the small office to a larger space and hired 2 associates. Sarah visited often, proud of what I had built. "You know what's ironic?" she said during one visit. "If Dad had just been honest from the beginning, he might have kept half of everything." "Sometimes people can't see beyond what they want in the moment," I replied. The woman who had once defined herself as David's wife and Sarah's mother had discovered a new identity: mentor, business owner, and advocate. The envelope I had handed David at the restaurant hadn't just been my escape plan. It had been the key to a door I never knew existed. Behind it, I found not just revenge, but reinvention. By securing my financial future, I had also reclaimed something far more valuable: myself. The sweetest revenge isn't about destroying your enemy, but about rising up yourself, living a life so brilliant that the one who hurt you is left stunned. I didn't just reclaim what was lost. I found a stronger, truer version of myself, a masterpiece I meticulously crafted from the ashes of betrayal.